Welcome back, everyone. So today we're going to be talking about Season 1 again. We're going to continue our series on that, Marvel Season 1 that is. So today I thought it would be thematic to put the team up books together. So today we're going to be covering X-Men, Fantastic Four, and the Avengers. So if you've watched my other videos, I kind of take my time on each book and kind of just go through the story and then what I liked about it, what I didn't like, etc. So this one we're going to be trying to go a little bit quicker. I'm going to try to keep it about 10 minutes per book, roughly, just because there is 3 of them, and yeah, shouldn't take too long to go through them. I'll do my usual thing where I kind of give like an overall thing, go over who wrote and like drew it, go through the story, and yeah, so on. So overall, I thought the X-Men book, X-Men Season 1, again, was a pretty fun story with decent art. I didn't love it, but it was better than the previously 2 that I reviewed, Iron Man and Doctor Strange. Artwork was, pretty good. A little simple, but simple is good. One of my favorite books of all time, Invincible. Very simple art, but I mean, simple. Sometimes you just need simple. Simple is like good. So obviously, yeah, I liked it. So Dennis Hopeless and Jamie McKelvey, were the ones who worked on this book. So overall the writing bugged me just a little bit because overall, like throughout the story, there's random points where it'll jump back to flashbacks, and it doesn't always give you that text like to tell you that it did or how long ago it was, that kind of stuff. So right as soon as we start the book, open up the first page here. Essentially, we're starting in the middle of the story. So we're starting in the middle of the action. You see Jean Grey out there trying to catch things that are flying through the air and whatnot. And then the other side of that is the flashback to a couple weeks ago when she goes to the X-Mansion for the first time and meets the other X-Men. Now, so we're introduced to Jean Grey. Obviously, she's telekinetic. Other versions of her, she's also had like a little bit of telepathy or telepathic powers. So right away, she meets Cyclops, who bumps into her, and his glasses fall off and all that. So right away, she gets kind of like a bad impression of Cyclops right away because he's in such a rush or whatever to do something. And you kind of see him in his spandex for the first time. Prior to this, I don't think she has any knowledge that the school doubles as like a superhero team. So that's an interesting kind of like side thing, I guess. And then the other one she meets is Warren, who's Angel. So jumping back to the action, you can kind of tell Xavier, she didn't have a lot of time to train, and Xavier's trying to coach her like what to do and how to handle the situation. She's just trying to keep minimal damage to the civilians and stuff like that. And like I said, it jumps back and forth quite a bit. Like we shoot back to Cyclops training in the danger room, where Xavier is basically trying to coach him into being the leader he can be, the leader he knows he can be. And so that's mostly what this is about. This is basically just a pep talk section, and then we jump back again to the action where Cyclops is trying to cut a little bit loose, ends up getting knocked away by an anchor, blowing out part of a building. Jean has to like catch a giant section of the wall that got blown up. So this is when she meets the other members of the X-Men. You'll see Hank McCoy, Beast, and Bobby Drake, the Iceman. And that's pretty much the ensemble of the cast of the team, really. So you see, yeah, this is where you get a good shot of Angel revealing his wings and Iceman going full ice. And then again, we jump back to the action. So I don't mind split narrative, like when you're telling 2 different stories at once. But this one, this book just kept jumping back and forth. Look, it jumps back again twice on 2 different pages here. I'm not a huge fan of that. And essentially, so this is 3 weeks after Jean Grey gets there, and this is her first time encountering Magneto. This is the first time, I believe, the X-Men period at this point had met Magneto. So they don't know who Magneto is or what he stands for or any relations to anything else. And instead of pursuing him, obviously they retreat and head back. And Cyclops, being the leader he is, or I guess the hard-headed dude he is, goes back straight to the danger room to continue training because he's disappointed with his performance against Magneto. And then in this side, you see Xavier reaching out to Magneto to talk to him. He's like, "Hey, what's going on? This is not cool, man." Kind of typical Charles Xavier Magneto relationship going on there. Of the Magneto is more of the extremist, and Xavier is more of the pacifist, trying to live peacefully along humanity. So this one, we kind of get into some weird kind of like relationship stuff. That's the other thing I didn't quite care for in this book, is that they try to do like a love triangle, because in the comics traditionally, a love triangle has always existed between Jean Grey, Cyclops, and Wolverine. But this book, having no Wolverine, they try to use Angel to fill his shoes, and it's just kind of weird because at a point it's not even a triangle, it's more like a weird line, and it's just not great. So at this point where Angel's talking about how it's hard for him to find anybody that'll want to be in a relationship with him because of his wings, and how he's a mutant, so he's weird. And so Jean tries to cheer him up by taking him out to the carnival, and she's trying to invite all the X-Men. She interrupts Cyclops' training, and Cyclops reacts a little harshly because he's like, "What the heck do you want? I'm in here training. I just fell off a dragon because of you. What do you want?" And she just kind of like, "Well, whatever. Just whatever." And then we get into some stuff about Jean Grey talking about how her powers manifested and how it freaked out her parents. And then Angel replies with kind of how his wings started kicking in, so he just started wearing trench coats all the time, and all of his super rich buddies never cared or paid attention. They didn't even notice. And then, so Iceman and a Beast are walking around the carnival, and they come upon this, which is like a freak show part of the carnival. I can't say I've ever seen one, but for the narrative, whatever. And Beast and Iceman jump into action and start beating the crap out of random people who start instigating a fight against the mutants that are basically part of the freak show. And so yeah. And they end up, this lady over here gets the wrong impression, and she starts firing off like bullets, like, "Hey, you better knock it off," or whatever, "You mutant kind, you're scum," whatever. And then a bunch of people just start rallying, heading over towards the carnival. Regular people just looking to beat some face because there's a lot of prejudice towards mutants in this society. So there's a giant fight, and then obviously Jean Grey and Angel notice that there's a big conflict going on, so they jump over and jump into it. And then enter the Blob. So he comes out, he's like, "What is wrong with all of you? We're just trying to get by," and blah, blah, blah. It's kind of like got a more, you can tell he's definitely going to be part of the Brotherhood, because he's definitely got more of an extremist view on it. Like, "We were fine until you guys showed up. You just get the heck out of here. This is how we make our money. This is how everything goes." And then enter Cyclops trying to defuse the situation by shooting a couple of beams, and then Xavier straight up puts Blob to sleep. So moving forward from that, Xavier and the rest of the X-Men just kind of head back. Angel hooks up with like one of the freaks, part of the freak show, and then this is kind of like the building point of this like Cyclops and Jean relationship. And Cyclops realizes he feels bad about the whole thing earlier. He overreacted a little bit, and so he's trying to reach out to her. And then again, this is the recruitment phase or section where Magneto tries to recruit Blob over to the Brotherhood. And then this is where Charles is kind of like, "Hey, if you're gonna date the other boys," and he's just kind of like one of those weird talks. It's just kind of strange. It's just kind of weird again, the whole relationship thing. And then here's another, like the timeline of this is kind of weird because up here it just says 2 weeks ago. It doesn't give a location. It doesn't say anything other than that. We find out they've been tied up by somebody for something. She apparently can't use her telekinesis to untie the ropes or whatever, and they're about to get eaten by a giant dinosaur. Now, what we can put together from this is that I believe they're in the Savage Land, which is below, I think, the North Pole. I'm not entirely sure. And then here we jump back to some point in time, again, like there's no bubbles or speech or text of any kind to say when. And it's just Iceman freaking out because he saw the Blob, Magneto, Quicksilver, Toad, and up here would be Wanda, so Scarlet Witch. says he saw him in town. He's trying to talk to Hank, like, hey, let's go scope it out. And then Hank obviously retorts with, why not go get Xavier first? And he's like, no, let's just go do it. Let's go on an adventure. And then here's Cyclops asking Angel for some weird relationship advice on how to ask a girl out. And he picks up on that it's Jean, and Jean overhears it. And again, just weird relationship stuff. And then we flash back to here, just randomness, just again with the dinosaur, just because. And so, like, yeah, they can't use their powers to escape because whatever. And then, so Beast and Iceman do head into the city to the spot where Iceman claims he saw the Magneto and the Brotherhood. And yeah, so Beast sees Charles Xavier walking into the building and decides to do a little investigating of his own using his like beast-like powers. Starts spying on them, sees them all like kind of just like peacefully talking and all that, gets suspicious, and then Blob sees Beast through the window and just kind of blows out the wall. It would lead to an altercation, except this kid on a random skateboard ends up flying off almost in front of a truck, and Iceman and Beast step in to save him. And instead of being thankful, all the civilians are like, get your hands off him, blah, 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 you're terrible because you're different, all this other crap. And so yeah, this leads to Beast and Iceman just kind of heading out on their own, and the Brotherhood just not doing anything. Like, it doesn't really do much. It's just, I guess it's just to drive the point to Beast that like nobody loves or nobody likes you even if you do good things because you're a mutant. Kind of just stuff, I guess. It doesn't, like I said, it doesn't really do much for the story. And then this is just Iceman talking to Jean, trying to see if she's seen Beast because Beast never came back to the mansion. Fast forward a bit, we flash back once again to the T-Rex situation where Cyclops shows up and saves the day, which leads to Jean be smooching him, as you can see, because, you know, saved life or whatever. Then we flash back again to another unknown time where Iceman is just skating through the halls, and then he notices that Cyclops is using a hologram version of Iceman instead of, you know, actual Iceman. He says it's to increase his training because the holograms listen to exactly what Cyclops says, so he's working on his leadership skills, more or less. And he goes in and he sees there's also versions of Jean and Beast, and he's like, hey, you know what? This is really cool, but I want to get better at doing what I do, and I'm bored and no one else is here, so let me be part of your training. I'll listen to exactly what you have to say. Like, I want to be the Iceman. And so they start training together, and Jean is training, Charles is training Jean more to control her telepathic abilities on a more specific or precise manner by playing chess, hovering the pieces above the board instead of on the board, which is pretty cool. It's a neat idea. I wouldn't have thought of it, that's for sure. And this conversation between Beast and Charles kind of boils down to Beast doesn't believe in Charles's philosophy anymore. He feels like they're not really fighting, or they're not going to get anywhere with what they're trying to do, and he just kind of takes off and just kind of tells Charles off, like, hey, you know, I'm just disappointed in you. You're kind of a hypocrite. You're out there communicating with the enemy, and we're just here. So again, with the weird love triangle thing, Jean and Warren, they're kind of like had a weird relationship, not really being around each other. She finally tells him, like, hey, I used to have a crush on you, and he decides to kiss her, and she's like, well, that's not what that was supposed to be. And she kind of blows him off and takes off. And Scott witnesses it, and Scott is like, hey, what the heck? And then, yeah, again, just weird love triangle stuff. Jean hunts down Beast and is like, hey, we need you to come back, blah, blah, blah. You know, Iceman really misses you and all these things. Tell me what's going on. And Beast is just kind of like, well, you know, I used to be happy I was a mutant. Like, when I first manifested, I was just an all-star at sports, and then people realized, well, I was different, and they didn't like me anymore, so I joined Charles's mission to kind of bridge the gap between mutants and humankind, and he just thinks it's hypocritical, and it's not really going to accomplish anything, and he just thinks that he should use his mind going forward and just kind of better society through scientific breakthroughs and stuff like that. So we jump again to some point in time after that, where the X-Men are trying to foil a bank robbery by some dude whose apparent mutation is that he just can't be touched. Like, no damage can be done to him because he's got this like crazy force field. So Iceman just bounces off Cyclops' beams, ricochet. Jean can't do anything about like touching him or anything. Angel tries to directly disobey Cyclops by trying to approach him, and Cyclops blasts him out of the air. And you know, obviously Angel's kind of butthurt about it. He's like, "Wait, what the heck? Why are you shooting me? We're supposed to be getting the bad guys." And then it looks like, what's the word? Cyclops is, I don't know what you would say, but he basically can't figure out what to do. He can't think of anything to do, and then Beast shows up and saves the day with a machine he was working on earlier. And it kind of just one shot KOs him. And then Iceman just kind of blows him off because he's like, well, it took you a long time. And then, so everybody's having lunch, and then Warren comes in with a pizza reconciliation to try and better his relationship with Jean and Scott, and they all just kind of blow him off and take off. So this leads to Cyclops going into the danger room and training by himself because Iceman was late. Iceman had went to go get some food or whatever, and so amongst his training, all of a sudden the tiles all come flying at him and trap him in this dome, and he's like stuck. He can't get out. And Professor X, we see that it's Magneto attacking the mansion, and he straight up takes Charles out of the commission, puts his helmet on him, and chains him to a wall. So, yep, Magneto's in the mansion, and nobody else knows about it. And then Magneto shows up and starts tying up Beast to the ceiling and whatnot, and just taking out the X-Men one by one. So we see, again, so Iceman returns to the X-Mansion to see Angel flying around like crazy, and Magneto just kind of pulls all the pipes out of the ground and ties them up, and Iceman gets away. Magneto goes to where Cyclops is trapped, and he's like, hey, you better not blast me as soon as I reveal this. And then when he reveals it, it's Jean in the way. So if he would have blasted him, he probably would have incinerated Jean on the spot. And so Jean kind of gives him his pep talk to get over himself, and they work together, and they're going to escape this bubble. Meanwhile, Magneto's still looking down for Iceman, and Iceman is able to get the jump on him by using an ice decoy. So like I said, Jean gives him his little pep talk, and he blasts his way out of the dome of the metal sheets or whatever. And then you see Iceman going through and freeing the different members of the X-Men. He frees Beast first, and then he's able to freeze all the pipes off of Angel, which leads to them regrouping with Xavier, only to find like Magneto knows where they are, blows up the ceiling or blows out the wall or whatever. He's got Xavier by the head because, magnetism and such. And then basically Cyclops picks himself up the ground and rallies him, and then for some reason Jean is giving some kind of speech to Magneto or something stupid, and then it just kind of ends right there. So what did I like and what didn't I like? I kind of touched through it going through the book for the most part, but honestly I didn't really care for the love triangle or love line that they were trying to do. I thought it was really dumb. Just weird relationship stuff in there for no reason. It's just weird. And you can definitely tell it's because she's the only female on the team for some reason. They didn't feel the need to include Jubilee, which is huge part of the X-Men since I don't even know when. She's been in the animated series. She was in comics for a long time. They didn't feel the need to include Kitty Pryde, who's been in a lot of the movies recently. Again, this was written way back when, 2012, 2013, but still, Kitty Pryde has always been a pretty popular character, whether she was Shadowcat, Kitty Pryde, or I think she had another alias, Sprite, I think. Kitty Pryde has always been a big character. You couldn't include, it's just kind of weird that they took that approach with it. What else didn't I, like I said, the time jumping back and forth so frequently was just kind of annoying from a narrative perspective. It made parts of it confusing too, because then you jump back and forth and it's just kind of weird. Like I said, the story is pretty much about them coming together to fight the Brotherhood at the end, at least, or more, I guess, their journey to becoming a team and fighting together. Book ends with Magneto. Yeah, I'm disappointed that they ended the book that way. It's just they're rallied and ready to fight Magneto, and that's just how the book ends. It's way to leave on a cliffhanger. All the other books, for the most part, wrapped up with a pretty satisfying ending. And then this one was just you know, that fight we've been building towards, we're not going to show it to you. And it was just kind of like it just seemed like a waste that they didn't introduce those other Brotherhood characters and they didn't use any of them. Like apart from the part where Blob blows out the wall, you never see Quicksilver, Scarlet Witch, or Toad do literally anything. So it's just kind of like a waste to have them in the book, period. I already talked about how the book overall is kind of bogged down by the awkward romance. But overall, the art was good, and you know, the story was fun. It was entertaining, but by no means would I be going out of my way to read it again. So I guess extra medium, I would say, is my like overall feeling on that book. So moving on to Fantastic Four. So we've got season 1 of Fantastic Four. So the artwork on this one is pretty good. I enjoyed it. I love this when it can be both detailed and clean. So you can see like expressions are drawn, muscles are drawn like pretty well. You can see all the like detail they put into not only the artifacts in the museum, but also the Lady Liberty. Like I really enjoyed that. So yeah, I thought this was one of the better ones of the season 1 series. I thought the art was good, the writing was good, and it was unique too. I thought it was unique because the other season 1 books kind of reference the Fantastic Four at times. Like the Spider-Man one, I think there's a panel when there's like a TV on the news in the background and you can see the Fantastic Four. I think one of the other books, whether it was Spider-Man or Ant-Man, has like a quote, a line or two about the Fantastic Four. So that's pretty cool. I like that a lot. So not to get too ahead of myself, Roberto Aguirre Sacasa and David Marquez are the ones that worked on this book. Neither were none of those names familiar. However, I wouldn't mind tracking down some of their other work. So it's a fun origin story. So I guess we'll just get into it. So right away we're introduced to, so it does like a cool thing where it's like, hey, the Fantastic Four, and then it kind of goes through the narration of how they got there. And essentially what's happening is Sue and Reed they're already been dating for quite some time. She's expecting marriage at some point. So it's well established that they're a group of friends, much like most of the origins depict them. And what Reed is working on in this one is he's working on a space shuttle. So the space shuttle he owns is privately owned, actually. And he's trying to be like the first one to do like space travel, essentially. So what he's trying to do, like, I guess for the glory of it, he's very hubris and prideful. So yeah, she's trying to talk him out of it because there's cosmic rays approaching the Earth, and he's just like, well, don't worry about it. It's safer statistically than car travel, but that's got to be due in part to the fact that no one else has a space shuttle or a private space shuttle. So then we flash over to Ben Grimm, who's training in the gym. Throughout the story, we kind of learn about his relationship with Reed, and I'm unclear on whether or not they were childhood friends or not, but it's definitely clear that after college they stayed friends, and Reed is the one that talked him into getting into shape so they can go to space together. So he loses a lot of weight and becomes like a big burly dude out of like the Bronx or something. Johnny is like typical, like how Johnny's usually depicted, just attractive dude who's just out there doing his thing. So he's out shooting commercials and stuff like that, trying to pick up ladies and whatnot. So that's his thing, is just kind of just like flirting with the lady taking his pictures and whatnot. And then we immediately jump over to them getting ready to take off. Now again, this is a private shuttle and this is on the other side of the country, whereas the Baxter building, I'm like pretty sure is in New York, based on the fact that it's, you know, the Lady Liberty is nearby and all that things. This is actually, the shuttle is actually, Stockton, California. So he went well across the country so he couldn't be tracked and all that stuff. And so they have a successful launch into space. It's really nice and things like that. They start getting into small talk between Reed and Sue, and they're talking about how happy they are. And then all of a sudden, all the warning beeps go off, and then the cosmic rays hit him. At this point, he's like, he can't do anything about the ship, and he has to call down to the scientist, his assistant, and he has to basically have her take remote control. And then you kind of see ahead of time all of their mutations starting to manifest. You see Johnny catching on fire. You see, you can kind of tell that Reed is trying to stretch him a little bit, and Sue is going a little invisible. And then They do kind of like a weird texture thing over Ben to show him, like, to, I guess, foreshadow the fact that he's transforming into the rock monster. So Alyssa, the scientist, controls it and ends up being able to guide it back to Ithaca, New York, which isn't far, supposedly, from where they are. And it's just pretty interesting how they all, like, see each other afterwards. Reed is all sprawled out across some rocks, and Sue's, like, she's, like, convinced he's dead, and then he just gets up and starts, like, walking around all stretched and stuff. And she accidentally turns herself invisible. So it basically just goes into a thing where, like, they kind of just, like, realize that they have metahuman powers and things like that, and they're like, what? You know, it's just kind of funny. Obviously, Ben is not happy about being transformed into the thing. So when Alyssa, he tries to beat up Reed, but Reed, being stretchy, doesn't, you know, take much damage or anything. He gets hit with a tree, just kind of walks it off. And then Sue manifests a force field to just kind of like, hey, stop being children. And then from here, Alyssa shows up and she gives them all a ride back to the Baxter building with some small talk going on in the middle of it. Ben obviously takes off because it's traditionally how Ben acts, is as soon as he transforms, he just pieces out. He's out to just try and clear his mind. So Reed spills the news to Sue and Johnny that they shouldn't, you know, break quarantine for like a month and they could just stay here for a bit. And then Johnny takes off and Thing is out and about and he witnesses this and he's like, well, this kid is going to get us in trouble. Yeah. So Thing out in his adventures, kind of reminiscing about his childhood and how he grew up and everything and how he's always been part of the city. Reed and Alyssa are trying to crack down on pretty much just trying to figure out how to reverse reverse the mutations. So that's pretty interesting. And then Sue overhears Alyssa because Alyssa is convinced that Sue thinks that there's something going on between them. And then she's kind of like, nah. So moving forward, the paparazzi are talking about like tremors and things like that. And this homeless dude is freaking out. He's just like freaking out about monsters and stuff. And they're all like, yeah, some crazy guy. So moving forward, Alyssa talks about how there's a monster rampaging. Yeah, so this is when we get introduced to our first villain character. And they kind of all suit up and they're ready to go. And he tells Sue that she should hang back because getting invisible is not going to be that helpful. And so it's just Johnny, Reed, and the Thing. And they go, and this is the giant monster they got to fight. It's just some giant just thing. They have no idea what it is and no idea where it came from. All they know is there's just been a lot of seismic activity. So this is when Alyssa and Sue had their like kind of like little confrontation. And she's like, well, we're not doing anything. And Sue's like, I don't care. I know you're not doing anything. I just want to go out there. And she's like, well, I'm not going to stop you. And Thing is out there trying to usher people away. And they're convinced he's a baby monster instead of trying to help. And then, yeah, so they figure out this dude, or one of the civilians talks about this guy and Reed's like, he has no idea where it is. And Sue actually finds him. And it turns out the Mole Man is actually a scientist from back in the day who taught at the college while Mr. Fantastic was there. So basically, she talks him into recalling the monster pretty much in exchange for a safe place to be, because she explains that all of them are different or mutated in some kind of way. And she's like, well, just come work with us and, well, you know, I'll be peaceful. Just call out your monster. So that ends up happening. Yeah, skip forward a bit. And then, so this is when they get a glimpse of how strong Sue is when she holds up the monster from crushing people because they tripped him. And again, so this is just like, they basically just work it out. He's like, yeah, I remember you, Reed Richards. You were a smart guy. You were back in the class, blah, blah, blah. This is pretty cool. Like, they introduce a villain person, like, of sorts. And the way they talk, they just talk it out. And I think that's pretty cool, pretty unique. And I like the Mole Man. I think he's a cool character. And then this is where Johnny jumps the gun and titles them the Fearful Four or something like that, or something weird. We all have code names. Fearsome Four. So Johnny just kind of, he's weird about that. And then this is Thing just busting his chops and giving him crap for it. And then Reed tries out a big brain move, or, looking like a big head. And Sue's like, nah, you're stupid, that's dumb. So moving from here, Reed develops the fabric that'll allow them to use their powers and costume without Johnny burning up the clothes, or Sue having to be naked to be completely invisible, or things like that. A fabric that'll stretch with Mr. Fantastic. And he kind of tells Sue, like, hey, you have the potential to be the strongest of us. And then they set up a press conference where they finally change their name and stuff like that. And they each get titled something. Obviously, Mr. Fantastic, Invisible. It's supposed to be Invisible Woman, but she calls her the Invisible Girl on accident. The Human Torch, who in this universe, the original Human Torch, the android, was a thing back in the day. Now, whether it was World War II or prior to that or after that, it's never very clear. They never really dive into it that much. And obviously the Thing. So at this point, Namor sees the Human Torch. Is like, hey, wait a minute, I had an arch nemesis named the Human Torch. And for some reason, he was a hobo with no memory or whatever, and that is what stirred him. And then you see this part is like just kind of like the celebrity fandom with that comes when you're a superhero with no secret identity. So she kind of uses her powers to escape with her friend after signing a couple autographs. And then we come to this, which again is Namor. For some reason, he had forgotten who he was, remembering who he is, remembering that he had a conflict with the Human Torch. And then, so he dives off a random pier, having like blown off the other hobos that grew to know him or whatever. He takes off and he goes to find Atlantis. Yeah, Ben is like dreaming about how he used to be, and Human Torch wakes him up and all that kind of stuff. The typical tortured monster kind of thing that they usually do with Ben. So Reed had figured out a way to They used pieces of the ship that were affected by cosmic rays, and they basically build a machine with enough power to shoot Ben with enough cosmic rays that it might have with the same basically effect. It might reverse the mutation. So Namor goes looking for Atlantis and he finds it in ruins. Nowhere, no people to be found anywhere, nothing, no artifacts, nothing, absolutely nothing. So he starts interrogating random tourists, and this is explained where they found the energy for the cosmic rays to shoot Ben with the energy. And so they go to the museum. This is the panel I showed earlier, but basically the Museum of Atlantis. And Submariner is like, Namor is just cheesed. He's like, why? What do you have all these relics for? You're obviously the ones that destroyed it and then pillaged everything to display for nothing. And at this point, Human Torch is on a date on the Statue of Liberty with the photographer from the photo shoot earlier. And Namor is like blown on his conch shell to do, we'll see in a second. But we see that the experiment on Thing is successful, and he transforms back into a regular person. And at this point, Namor finds Human Torch and Sue, and he's talking to them about how Sue, I don't know, for whatever reason, all the Fantastic Four stuff, he's always had a thing for Sue for some reason. And Human Torch doesn't understand that Namor was in conflict with the Human Torch before him. And she traps them both in an air bubble and tells Johnny to go supernova, but that ends up backfiring because when he does that, he burns off all the oxygen. So Namor is just sitting there pretty much unfazed while Johnny's dying of oxygen deprivation. Pretty interesting thing. And then Namor blows up the shuttle she's on, and Reed is freaking out because he has no idea what's going on. And Thing, overhearing all this conflict and what's going on, and it turns out Leviathan is what Namor was blowing the conch about, so it woke it up from its slumber. And Ben is freaking out because he's useless now. He's just a regular person, he can't do anything about it. So he convinces Mole Man to use the machine to hit him again with that cosmic radiation at the risk of dying to hopefully turn back into the Thing. So Fantastic shows up and he's like, hey, where's everybody? And he's like, oh, I killed him. And so he just goes nuts. He's trying to figure out a way to like choke out Namor or something to that manner, and it's just not working. And then Sue shows up and saves the day by separating them. and Johnny's like makes a quick remark about how Sue was on the swim team in high school or something, just something dumb, just something funny. And then, so yeah, she finds the conch and Reed's like, oh, that's very cool. We should figure out, you know, what to do with this. And then the Leviathan shows up on the, like, you know, shows up in New York with the Thing, but the Thing takes Mo Monster's big monster and he's like, goes out there and basically Pacific Rims it, takes his monster to fight the other one. And you get the famous clobber in time, clobber in time quote. And then, so amidst the fight, Reed tells, you know, Human Torch to blow the conch, and he does so, and he leads the battle back into the ocean, basically to its place of slumber, so it can go back to sleep. And then the book kind of closes with Namor being locked up, and Ben explaining that he was happy to take the transformation back because his role is always to protect his family, and it ends with them committing basically to being a team, and they're going to get through basically everything together. And it's just, you know, kind of like one of those happy family things, like they're all one and one for all and that kind of stuff. So again, a pretty unique book. I really liked it. There is a mention of Doom at some point. He sees a broadcast of Mr. Fantastic, and he's like, oh, this guy's finally did something with his life. I can see if I can try to find that panel really quick. But so yeah, 2 different villains. I thought that was pretty awesome. I really enjoyed where's the Mr. Victor Von Doom part? Please be patient with me while I look for that. But yeah, pretty cool. They introduced Mole Man and they handle that like civilly, which I thought was interesting. You don't usually see that. It's not super popular with writers or in comics period, really. So I thought that was pretty cool. Oh, here it is. It's amid when they're naming themselves. You can see Doom, like, I believe the quote is, finally, Richards does something interesting. Mildly. And that's the only mention of Doom. Obviously, this was to set up for a later volume, but as we know, it was discontinued and never got past the first one. So again, very unique. I really liked it. I thought the art was good. Writing was pretty good. So yeah, that one was enjoyable. I could see myself reading that one again in the future. So last but not least, we're on to the Avengers. Now this one, or I guess first, let me just double check my notes. We never really going back to the Fantastic Four book, we never figure out what happened to Atlantis. So maybe it was people and maybe it wasn't. No, it's very unclear. And it was definitely something to set up to possibly, explore later. Yeah, the Avengers, I got a lot of notes on that one because the narrative is so weird. Yep, okay, so that was all my notes from Fantastic Four. So again, moving back to the Avengers. So this one is pretty unique because it's got 5 people working on it. So you got David, DeVito, Buren, Rayner, and Bowden. I don't know, none of those names sound familiar by any means. And then you got this artwork on the back. So this one is kind of weird. It's almost like this should have been a sequel book because very quickly, we'll go through the pages real quick. So Loki, we start off the story with Loki basically yelling at himself in a reflection of water because he got beat, really. No more reasoning than that. And then this random troll, I don't even know who this is. Yeah, I don't even think he's ever named. Basically, this troll is like, hey, what are you yelling about? And he basically explains the story of how the Avengers defeated him. He tried to mind control or influence the Hulk into fighting Thor. And then once they realized he was being mind controlled, all the OG Avengers teamed up against him. So you see Iron Man in his like super classic vintage armor. Nothing like the season 1 armor by any means. Hulk, Ant-Man, Wasp in her classic uniform, and Thor. And he says, not only did they defeat me, not only did they become allies, but when the Hulk departed their ranks as a newly sworn enemy, they salvaged a leftover force for good from their Second World War, the godly attired Captain America. So basically, after they defeated the Loki, Hulk went off to go do his own thing and was, I guess, an enemy of the Avengers. I don't know, it's pretty unclear as to why or how, but and then you get the this version of the Avengers, which is Giant Man, Wasp, Iron Man, Captain America, and Thor. So why is this kind of weird? Well, if this is supposed to be an origin one-off, why did they start, or why are we having a story about after their first team up together? Just not, I don't really understand. And so this troll is like, well, hey, isn't there anything you can do? And so Loki basically gets the idea to turn the Avengers on each other. So the Avengers at this point are hunting down the Hulk, and you kind of get some panels of Iron Man fighting the Hulk, and the fight ends with just Hulk or Iron Man getting beaten to death. Pretty brutal, honestly. And then it turns out it was a simulation run by Iron Man, and Iron Man's AI gives him crap for it. He's like, how about a nice game of chess instead, since you actually have a chance of winning? I thought it was pretty funny. So it was, Tony is kind of resting on Tony's shoulders, because Tony's the one that introduced the Hulk to the public as a force for good, and then at some point, you know, for whatever reason, the Hulk decided to go evil and go off on his own. And Tony is very skeptical of whether or not Thor is actually the god of thunder, because he doesn't buy it. He's like, there's no way, I'm a man of science. So we get introduced to Thor, and Thor's out there, you know, saving the day and stuff like that. This area has had a drought for ages, is what this guy over here is saying, and basically, thank you for the rain, are you here to protect us? And he dissipates a tornado by just spinning his hammer the other way. So, you know, just pretty cool, like, just, you know, easy hero stuff. And then for whatever reason, I can't remember exactly why, but Thor is suspicious of Captain America, because he's like, well, this guy's out of time. How can we trust him? He just kind of appeared out of nowhere. And then I love Captain America's speeches. When you got a good writer for Captain America, his speeches are always something like enjoyable to read. He's basically just beating up these gangsters, whether they're weapons runners or drug dealers. And he's like, yeah, so you really want to fight Captain America? And they were like, who is that? Because this is supposed to be shortly after he was revived, and nobody cares about World War II guys anymore. So, sorry. Captain America quickly dispatches these dudes. He's like, hey, you gather up all the weapons, I'm taking them with me, and I'm going to trash them, and you better tell people I'm around, is essentially his speech to the last guy that didn't get knocked out. So it's pretty funny to me. I thought it was pretty good. So then you transition to Captain America meeting up with the other Avengers, who are essentially, it seems like they're tasked by Thunderbolt Ross to hunt down the Hulk. So that's kind of who they're taking orders from, more or less, from my understanding. So they're out and they decide to split up and search different ways, which leads us into the illusions. So Captain America is driving through this town and he gets hit with something. He thinks it's a mosquito. I don't know why you think that. And he's riding on a motorcycle going, who knows how fast, and he thinks a mosquito bit him. And he ends up in this town and he's like, oh, hey, what's up, everybody? And like basically he shows up just in time for a parade. And you can see this is kind of like the idea that he's being mind controlled is presented up here. Basically, he shows up just in time for this parade, all American, flying flags, red, white, and blue confetti. And then he starts getting suspicious. He's like, wait a minute, I had a mission. Who are you? What's going on? And then he flips out and starts throwing around security guards and just throwing people about willy-nilly. And then he wakes up from the table where he's being, like, it seems like he's being experimented on by Red Skull and Hydra. So he throws hands real quick at Red Skull and he tries running his way through the compound looking for his shield, beating up Hydra goons along the way, just trying to escape, really. So he gets a shield, and then he's like, they're like cybernetic robots or whatever, or the Nazis. They're not real Nazis. He's throwing hands, trying to escape everything, and he finds the scientist who got ditched, it seems, by Red Skull. Whether or not she was fatally injured or not, it's kind of like for your interpretation kind of thing, because it looks like she's dying, but there's kind of no explanation on how. I guess it's implied that Red Skull shot her on his way out. I don't know. Compound explodes, and Captain America, being Captain America, survives. And then he realizes that the whole town was fake and that nothing was real, obviously, because at this point, it's Hydra doing brainwashes. But the scientist says before she dies that it was Tony Stark that put him up to it. So he was already suspicious of the billionaire, but now even more so. Again, going back to that Loki thing of trying to turn the Avengers on each other. So for some reason, Iron Man ends up in Reno where he finds Mr. Hyde. And so he ends up getting into a huge fight with them and just throwing hands and throwing dumpsters and all this other stuff. So after their fight, after he throws them around a bit, he turns back into, I guess, Mr. Hyde, because that would be Dr. Jekyll, right? Or the other way around. Regardless, he reverts back into a human, and all of a sudden, all these Korg aliens seemingly invaded Reno without him knowing. I don't know how all these things can happen and none of these people get red flags. I don't know. I would suspect there's some shenanigans. Iron Man tries to communicate with the other Avengers and can't hear anything. And then the aliens, you know, they're still whipping out lasers and just shooting up like all the stuffs. And at this point, Iron Man's identity as Tony Stark is still unknown. So Iron Man owns this bar, but he can't say like, I own it to the security guard that's trying to help him out or anything. He's just like, hey, Mr. Stark said, get the heck out of here. There's a lot of stuff going down. So he tries to chase him down. The aliens are getting away in their ship, and they just kind of blast him out of the sky. And I think because he got shot down with lightning or something, Iron Man grows even more skeptical of, or no, it was a UFO sighting recently with Thor. So he's like, oh, well, those aliens are obviously tied to Thor, so I gotta go beat him up and get the information out of him. So now we go over to Thor's illusion, which is this guy, Zarko, stealth working Man of Tomorrow, who's basically, from what I can tell, a time traveler Thor had fought sometime in the past. And Zarko knows he's looking for the Hulk, so he whips out the classic Grey Hulk, and Grey Hulk goes out there to fight him. So he's beating up Grey Hulk or whatever, and so he's like, oh, you're not having trouble with that? And then he sends out the Green Hulk. Thor tried to call his bluff too. He's like, everybody knows the Hulk is green, and now he's got to fight two Hulks. It's pretty funny. And Thor ends up giving them some kind of speech like, if you're so strong, why are you working for that guy? So the Hulks turn on Zarko and jump up towards his ship to try and fight him. And so Zarko whips out his time machine and whips them back to whatever reality they came from. And then Thor goes up into his ship and sees that he's been spying on him. And here's the important one. Captain America. He sees Captain America and he's like, wait a minute. Captain America was just now introduced and you're a time traveler, so you must have brought him back for some reason. And he gets super skeptical. And Zarko's like, what are you talking about? Ends up throwing Thor off the ship and teleporting away before Thor can question him anymore. And so Thor goes out looking for the Avengers, and then this is when it's revealed, basically through Loki's dialogue, that Enchantress was responsible for Captain America's illusion. Who is this guy? This name is Ulik, and the Rock Trolls were the ones that were responsible for Iron Man's illusion. And then obviously Zarko was responsible for what was going down with Thor. However, the Hulks were robots, and the Monitor didn't actually have Captain America on it. It was Loki doing a little finesse magic to confirm Thor's suspicions and basically turn them against each other. So they're arguing, and Hulk just kind of like is just chilling nearby, and he's like, you guys are morons. And they're all like, well, we came for you. And then they all start fighting. Like Thor tries to get the drop on him, and Hulk just jumps out of the way of the hammer and starts throwing hands. And then you see, I always love it when people catch the shield and just whip it at somebody. So you see Captain America almost lose his head by his own shield. And then so they stop fighting amongst each other, and they're finally teaming up against the Hulk. And Hulk's not struggling too much. I mean, he's still whipping people around and stuff, but it's actually Hulk's dialogue that's like, he says, you losers, you still don't get it. Don't you learn anything? The whole thing stinks of the exact thing that got you guys together in the first place. And they're all like, wait a minute. Yeah, it does. But it takes, Loki tries to manipulate the situation even more by firing off Iron Man's lasers and which sends Hulk into the dam, which is an important part. And then he also tries to encourage rage on Thor. Wait, was it Thor that? Yeah, it was Thor's hand. So Loki triggered Iron Man's lasers and then triggered wrath within Thor, which sent Hulk flying. And then Iron Man's like, hey, why'd you do that? And Thor's like, wait a minute, I don't know. And so they see the nearby town, and they see the dam breaking, and they're like, well, we gotta do something about this. So even the Hulk is like not like a jerk or anything. He starts, he's not out to kill anybody by any means. So he starts piling up rocks to try to slow down the water. And Hulk's like, hey, you got trillions of tons, or you got 1 billion tons of water coming after you. Why are you scared of me? I'm trying to help you guys out. So Iron Man and Thor tend to the leak, and Iron Man or Captain America's trying to rally everybody and just kind of like, hey, let's get out of here. We want to get you guys to safety. And then Odin finds Loki, and he's like, hey, why'd you do that? Now you need a more severe punishment. So that's pretty funny. And then Bruce Banner uses uses kind of like the chaos to escape. And then so between Thor and Iron Man, they're able to seal up the dam and stop it from being collapsed and being weakened and whatnot. And then they all kind of agree to just work together from now on. And then similar to the Thor season 1 book, Loki's tortured via snake for eternity or whatever. So let's quickly go over what I liked and didn't like. I like how they handled the manipulation. I thought that was really cool. Like just kind of like somebody there for Loki to disguise in order to turn the Avengers against themselves. I thought that was a pretty cool idea. I liked it a lot. I think it was better than the straight up brainwashing that they did in the Avengers movie. No, there's a lot about this book I didn't. Well, first off, the art was good. I like the art in this one a lot too. I thought both this one and Fantastic Four were really good. But the let me quick just go over my notes, make sure I don't miss anything. I think yeah, I got most of it. But again, I just want to voice, I did not care, I didn't care for how basically this is just like a second adventure for the Avengers, more or less. Giant Man and Wasp are just missing because they're just written out of the story. They're on vacation for some reason. So this is like a second story with not much of, like, there's not really a first story. It's just, hey, I tried to brainwash Hulk, and then you guys figured it out, and then that's just kind of it. I don't know, especially with the suspicions thing, I think it could have been just fine as a first, like, the reason they got together or the reason there is an Avengers was a result of this story, because it's basically what happens anyway. At the end, they're just like, yeah, we're all going to work together, and they they do the hip hip hooray thing. So I didn't care for why this story is what it is, but I enjoyed the story, if that makes sense. Again, just want to reiterate, I really liked it. I think that's going to wrap it up. So if you stuck around, thank you so much. Thank you for your support. There's only 2 other season 1 books. I don't have them yet, but they're pretty cheap, so I'll hopefully be able to pick them up here in the future. In the meantime, I've got some other DC books I want to do some reviews on. I'll get on that here shortly, probably within the next couple of days or something, so I can start prepping videos in advance so I can get back on a consistent schedule. Yeah, the last 2 season 1 books I'm missing are Wolverine and Daredevil, and I'm pretty excited to read those. I always enjoy a good Wolverine story, and Daredevil is always pretty fun just because, I like that character too. There's a lot of characters I like, actually. So again, if you made it all the way to the end, thank you so much. Thank you for watching. Thank you for supporting, and we'll see you next time.